Hello everyone, it's Lindsay, and today I'm bringing you another MemoryDex process using the, this time I'm using the August Faith Art box. So I do have an unboxing on my channel if you want to check that out. I will link that down below. This is Sweet to the Soul that was written by Julie from our design team, and I just cannot wait to dig in. And I pulled out my Bible and kind of had some ideas and then thought, you know what, I'm just kind of getting back into the crafting groove after taking the summer off, and I've really been enjoying these small MemoryDex projects, and so I thought, why not do another one? I'm loving it. I think you guys are really enjoying these, and you can definitely take the same techniques that I use on these cards and same ideas and translate it over into a Bible journaling entry as well. So don't feel like they just have to be MemoryDex cards. And so I'm going to show some fun techniques that you could adapt and use in a Bible journaling entry as well. So I love the colors of the kit this month. I love the yellows and the purples and the blues, and I was going to go with that, but as I was kind of gathering supplies, I just kind of got a little bit different of a vibe. I don't know if it's just because I'm yearning for fall so badly because it's a million degrees here in California, but I recently picked up this paper pad here from Tuesday Mornings. It's a very much Halloween themed paper pad, so definitely not for everybody. I completely understand that, but I like that it was a little bit more like abstract, not in your face Halloween. And I kind of flipped through and I found this really fun kind of grungy paper, and so I wanted to show you how you can alter the color of pattern papers, and so I'm going to do that with some distress ink today. And I thought this would be fun to do some heat embossing, and I thought the gold embossing powder would really pop off of a darker background, and I wanted to really bring out some of the gold accents from like the washi tape that's in the kit this month. So I grabbed that paper, and then I flipped through my stash to try to find some other papers that would coordinate with the yellows and oranges that are in this kit this month. So I found this one. I think I got this from Hobby Lobby like forever ago, so I don't know if it's still available, but it was another fall collection, so you might want to dig through your fall supplies to kind of find these yellows and oranges that are in the kit this month. And so I picked a couple of papers, and I am going to be doing some stamping and fussy cutting, but I wanted to do some distressing as well. So I pulled out some like texture stamps and some bubble wrap and thought we'd have some fun with that. And I grabbed some inks to do that stamping with, and I also want to do some stamping and coloring on vellum. I thought it'd be fun to do these little bees on vellum. So I don't know, I have not really like tested anything out ahead of time like I usually do. I just grabbed some supplies, had some ideas, and thought we'd just kind of roll with it and see what happens. That always isn't successful for me, but we'll give it a go. I am starting with just a standard MemoryDex card from the Heidi Swap MemoryDex system. I think that I had a video on my channel recently talking about the measurements, so I will share that with you if that's already up on my channel, so you can kind of see how that works. But let's go ahead and put you on fast forward and we will get this put together. Okay, so I'm going to start by changing the color of this paper. So I like to work on a non-stick craft mat. I've had a lot of questions about this recently. I always link it down below for you guys. I did cut mine in half just so it's a little bit smaller, but this gives you a way to nicely, evenly blend inks and you're not messing up your desk or your surface that you're working on. So I'm just using a foam mini ink blending tool and picking up some of that scattered straw distress ink. Now I am using regular distress ink, not distress oxide inks. Distress oxide inks are a little more opaque, and I didn't want it to make the black area look kind of milky and chalky, so I went with the regular distress inks. I found that those work a little bit better for changing the colors of patterned papers. And then I also spritzed a little bit of water on there, picked it up with a paper towel, and then dried it. Now you can see it really changes the look of that patterned paper. So I'm going to set that aside for just a second and work on these other two sheets. Now you could just stamp and cut off of these just the way they are, but I like the mixed media look, and I don't know, it just makes them look a little bit more finished when you do some paint and ink like I'm doing here. So I'm just using a variety of different texture stamps. I don't know that these ones are still available. If I can find them, I will link them down below. But the trick is to not put it on a stamp block. Just use your fingers and your hands, pick up the stamp, ink it up with some ink, and then just kind of smush it in random places, and that gives you that kind of grungy mixed media look. And then now I'm going in with some white acrylic paint, just spreading it over some bubble wrap and then stamping that down over the top. And that's just going to give me some different layers and textures on that plain yellow paper. If you don't have a lot of pattern papers, you could also ink up just some plain white cardstock or paper with some inks and then go in it with your stamping and your paint, and that would give you a similar effect. So you can see I did the same thing on that other paper there on the right hand side with a different stamp. And then now that it's dry, I'm going to go in with this Hexie stamp from the kit this month, and I've switched to some VersaFine Onyx Black ink just because it's a deeper black than the Licorice from Creative Retreat. And I'm just stamping that and, you know, picking some areas where I like the texture and the design that's on the paper and stamping those down. Same thing on this other paper, and then I can fussy cut those out. And you really can do this with a variety of different stamps. You know, I've showed paper piecing on my channel before. I'll link a video down below. It really just gives you some more options for your stamps. Now for this, I wanted a variety of sizes. So the smaller Hexie is a solid stamp. So I went ahead and found some of this newsprint pattern paper. This is from that Halloween collection, but you could use any newsprint pattern paper. And I'm just going to go in and stamp this one with that same scattered straw ink, and I'm just kind of picking areas on the print where, you know, I'm trying to avoid the like real obvious Halloween prints and just get the newsprint. Went ahead and fussy cut all of those out, and then now I'm going to work on my stamping. So I kind of positioned things where I thought it was going to go. I pulled out my stamp positioning tool, which I am thankful that I did, because I do end up kind of changing the direction I'm going and I mess up a little bit. So I'm loading up the stamps from the kit. It says your words are like honey, and I'm just laying those out on the stamp positioning tool, and then we're going to heat emboss. So I'm being sure to prep this page or this piece of paper with my EK Success powder tool, especially since I inked it up with the ink. I want to make sure that it's completely dry, that there's nothing that's going to grab a hold of the embossing powder other than the stamping that I do. So I am adding quite a bit of that powder. You could also use like baby powder or cornstarch. That would work as well. I'm going to ink up the stamps with some Versamark ink. This is a clear sticky ink, and making sure that I have plenty on there, and then I can go ahead and stamp that down. You won't be able to see the stamping because again it's clear and sticky. I can pull this out, and then I'll go ahead and pour some of that gold Ranger embossing powder over the top. This is new. I had picked this up recently and I hadn't swatched it yet, so I wasn't quite sure what color gold it was. I probably should have swatched it beforehand, because I'm tapping off the excess, I'm looking at it, and I can already tell that I'm going to have a hard time seeing some of those finer words, like the words are and like are very, very small, very delicate, and they're kind of getting lost on the background. But at this point, we got to just keep going forward. So I'm going to go ahead and heat set this. With embossing powder, you do have to heat set it. If you have questions about embossing, I will link a Tip Tuesday video down below that's all dedicated to embossing, embossing powders, and why you may not be getting good results and those kind of things. So definitely check that out if you're having some issues with embossing. But this is one of the many reasons why I like working on these MemoryDex cards, because of techniques like this. You can heat emboss in your journaling Bible, but it can be a little bit tricky, and so this allows you to still play with that technique and not have to worry about bleed through or messing up in your Bible. So it kind of gives you some freedom to try out some of those different techniques. Now when I heat set it, I realized I'm really losing the words. It was kind of hard to see them on that pattern paper. It didn't work out how I thought it was going to work out. So I pulled out that white acrylic paint and just adding a wash of white paint in the area where that heat embossing is. And I'm just kind of hoping at this point that it's going to work. If it doesn't work, then I'll have to scrap it and do something different. But I'm just brushing it on, and while it's still wet, I'm going to go in with a paper towel and kind of wipe it off of the embossing, which seems to be working okay, but it's now added kind of a haze to my embossing. But luckily I left all of my stamps in the stamp positioning tool, so I can go right back in and re-stamp this. So I dried that white paint, made sure that everything's good and dry. I'm going to go ahead and prep it with the powder tool once again, just to make sure that I get nice clean embossing. And I did not move any of those stamps, so I can stick that piece of paper right back in the same place in my positioning tool, ink it up, re-stamp it, and it's going to be right over the top of the stamping that I had already done. So I'm stamping that again with the Versamark ink, and I'll go ahead and apply some more of that embossing powder, and this actually kind of thickens up the embossing and kind of cleans it up, and so it really stands out against that white background. And in the end, I'm glad that I did this. So if you're going to recreate this, You can skip a step and just go straight in and add the paint first and then add your stamping or embossing, or you can emboss with white embossing powder, and that probably would have stood out a little bit better. So I'm just heat setting that until it's nice and melted and shiny, and now you can see, I can actually see the words. Now, I could just use some glue to adhere these little hexy pieces, but they're kind of delicate and small, and there's a lot of them. So I'm going to run them through my Xyron sticker maker. Basically, you just stick them through the top, pull out the paper on the bottom, and it's sandwiching these in there and adding adhesive to the entire back side. So we're creating some little DIY stickers. So you do want to rub all around your images, and that just pulls off any of the excess adhesive. You can pull off that clear paper from the top, and then now I can pull these off and just use them like stickers and stick them down. What I did was I kind of positioned them where I thought that I wanted before I stamped, and then took a picture with my phone, and then that way I go back in and make sure that I get them lined up where I wanted them from how I had them lined up before. So I'm just kind of just randomly sticking them, mixing and matching. Really love how this came out. This was partially inspired by one of the other gals on the design team. She'd done some mixed media hexes like this on a Bible page. I will link her blog post down below, and really inspired me to kind of do a similar thing for this card here. So now I can go ahead and trim off any of those excess pieces, and we will be adhering this to one of those MemoryDex cards just to beefing it up, because this paper is a thinner paper, and so I want to make sure it's nice and thick. But before I do that, I am going to go in with a white Uniball gel pen just to add some detail. Those small hexes, again, were just stamped with the colored ink, and they didn't have any black line detail, so I wanted to outline things just to kind of help them stand out from the background a little bit more, and just adds a little bit more detail. I'm not completely outlining these, I'm just adding some detail to the top and kind of left-hand side of all of those hexy pieces. Now I'm just going to go ahead and adhere that entire piece to that MemoryDex card. If you don't have those MemoryDex cards, you could just double up your paper. I've just found that they hold up a little bit better if you use a thicker cardstock or double up your pattern papers. That way it's less likely to tear. And then I already have my template, so I can go in with just a regular hole punch out those areas, and then just cut the little slits. It's not perfect, but it does still slide into the MemoryDex system. If you don't have the MemoryDex system, you could also do this in like a recipe box on 3x5 cards or something like that as well. I went ahead and tore off a little piece of that washi tape that says "Sweet to My Soul," and that finishes off the lettering from the verse that we're documenting. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of fabric that I had laying on my desk with a tiny attacher to kind of create a little bit of a tab there at the top. And now I'm going to add in the bees. So I pulled out a piece of vellum, and I'm going to heat emboss on this as well. So I prepped it with that powder tool, inking up the bee with that clear Versamark sticky ink. I'm going to stamp that down and then use that same gold embossing powder from Ranger. Ranger and Wow have my favorite embossing powders. I get the best results. They are nice and clean, they stick well, they melt well. So if you're having difficulty with your embossing, I would recommend one of those two powders. Now with vellum, when you're using any kind of heat, you want to be careful. So I'm kind of moving my heat from the front to the back. I'm continuously moving my heat tool. If you get vellum too hot, it really warps very easily. So you just want to keep your heat tool moving. So I went ahead and pulled out some brush markers. This one's like in a really deep gray. I did have a small black one. And then the terracotta color, and I've actually flipped the vellum over some coloring on the back side, and I'm just going to color in these bees. There isn't a lot of space to color in, but there is a little bit where you can just add a little bit of color. Just keep in mind that if you color on the back side of vellum, it is frosted, and so it kind of lightens the color, so you do want to lay down a pretty dark amount of color on the back side, so that way it shows through to the front. And that just kind of finishes those off. And then I did pull out my clear Wink of Stella glitter pen just to add a little bit of detail to the wings. It's very difficult to see in the pictures and in the video, but in person you can see that this adds a really fine glitter to their wings and just kind of dresses it up a little bit. Make sure that that's nice and dry, and then I did go ahead and fussy cut those out, and then I have some teeny tiny little foam squares, and I'm going to pop those up on those, and that way I can kind of fluff their wings and give them kind of a 3D effect in front of the card. Again, another nice thing about working on these MemoryDex cards is you can use some chunkier elements and 3D elements like this, and it isn't going to add bulk to your Bible pages since it's on a separate card. I did go ahead and flip it over on the back side, and because I used that MemoryDex card that's lined, I can go ahead and add the verse reference, take down some notes. I did go ahead and copy down some of the journaling from the devotional, added a couple of stickers from the kit this month, and finished that off. So I love that you could add a prayer on the back side, take your notes, do word definitions, all kind of things on the back of these cards. So there's a look at the finished card. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave those down below. Check out the description box for links to everything that I used in the video today. Give the video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe to the channel if you're not already subscribed. And until next time, thank you so much. Bye-bye.